Testing 1, 2. Testing, testing. English, testing English, Arthur. Can you hear me? Oh, testing English now? Testing English? Okay. Testing English, testing English, testing English. Okay, good. English, testing English.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. If I could ask members of council to take their seat. On va commencer la réunion dans une minute. We'll start the City Council meeting in 1 minute. If members of the public could also take a seat. Thank you. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Bonjour, mesdames et messieurs, et bienvenue à une réunion spéciale.
Welcome to the special council meeting.
The 4th of February 2015. For those who are able to, please rise for prayer. Almighty God, let us work together to serve all our people. Dieu Tout-Puissant, aidez-nous à travailler ensemble afin de bien servir nos citoyens. Madam Deputy Clerk, roll call, please.
Conseiller Manette.
Present.
Councillor Middick.
Present.
Councillor Harder.
Here.
Councillor Wilkinson.
Present.
Councillor Elshantiri.
Present.
Councillor Caudry.
Present.
Councillor Taylor.
Here.
Councillor Shirelli. Councillor Aguilar.
Here.
Councillor Deans.
Here.
Councillor Tierney.
Present.
Conseiller Fleury.
Ici.
Councillor Nussbaum.
Present.
Councillor McKenney.
Present.
Councillor Leeper.
Present.
Councillor Brockington.
Here.
Councillor Chernyshenko.
Present.
Conseiller Cloutier.
Present.
Conseiller Blais.
Present.
Councillor Derouz.
Here.
Councillor Moffat.
Here.
Councillor Kakush.
Present.
Councillor Hubley.
Here.
Mayor Watson.
Ici.
Le quorum est 10, Monsieur le Maire.
You have quorum.
Declaration of interests, including those originally arising from prior meetings. Déclaration de conflit d'intérêts. Communications as noted. Regrets, no regrets filed to date. Motion to introduce reports. Motion portant présentation de rapport. Conseil Shirelli et Fleury, s'il vous plaît.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Fleury, that the report from City Treasurer entitled 2015 Draft Budget, Capital Budgets, Tax and Rate Supported, the report from Committee of Adjustment entitled 2015 Draft Operating Estimates, Committee of Adjustment, the report from Crime Prevention Ottawa entitled 2015 Draft Operating Budget, CPO, the report from Ottawa Board of Health entitled Draft Board of Health 2015 Operating Budget, the report from Ottawa Police Services Board entitled Ottawa Police Services 2015 Draft Operating Capital Budgets, and the report from Ottawa Public Library Board entitled Ottawa Public Library 2015 Draft Budget Estimates be received and tabled, and that the report from Director of Human Resources entitled FTE Analysis Report, Information Supplemental to Budget Estimates be received and considered.
On the motion, carried. Good morning, bonjour et bienvenue à cette rencontre du Conseil.
Welcome to this council meeting.
Our first budget of this new term of council. To begin, I'd like to thank members of council again for their insight and input into the budget process. I appreciate you passing along your ward's priorities on behalf of local families and businesses. Few people know our community's needs better than our city councillors, which is why your involvement is so important. Based on our constructive conversations during the budget process, I'm very optimistic about the next 4 years. I'm confident that we'll be able to continue with a respectful, prudent, collaborative approach to managing our city's finances. Je remercie tous les conseillers de leur participation.
I'd like to thank all councillors for their participation in the budget drafting process. They know better than anyone the needs of their constituents. Our constructive and respectful discussions on the budget leave me very optimistic for the next few years.
Last week's State of the City address, 2015 will be a year of momentum. Budget 2015 fits in perfectly with that reality as we move forward swiftly and confidently on several ongoing initiatives. At the same time, we'll prepare Ottawa for continued success during our term of council. Through the investments and savings we create in Budget 2015, we will continue the momentum towards a more affordable, caring, sustainable, and prosperous city. Everything we do together must be done with the local economy in mind. While we are not immune to the economic instability, we have taken strong, careful steps to weather the storm. Over the past few years, Ottawa's economic story could have gone a lot differently. With our largest industry losing thousands of jobs, we chose to take action. We invested in economic development and entrepreneurship to support the private sector in its work to create jobs. We bolstered our tourism industry with award-winning strategies to help us bid more, win more, and host more. With traffic congestion on the horizon, we chose to change course by fast-tracking infrastructure projects with our Ottawa on the Move project. We took advantage of the lowest interest rates in a generation to invest in roads, sidewalks, and other key infrastructure. And we got shovels in the ground for the Confederation line and unanimously approved a plan to extend LRT farther east, west, and south. After years of instability and rate hikes, we brought in a more prudent approach to the city's finances. Tout en investissant dans des grands projets.
At the same time as investing in major infrastructure projects and creating jobs, we've succeeded in maintaining tax hikes to the lowest level that they've been for several years.
An affordable, predictable tax cap, bringing in the lowest increase in a number of years. At the same time, we explored innovative ways to provide services through our Service Ottawa initiative, which found more than $40 million in efficiencies and savings for taxpayers. We also established multi-year plans for key priorities such as arts and culture and housing and homelessness to ensure we have a clear direction. We changed the way we looked at long-term infrastructure planning by applying an affordability lens on future projects. Now we calculate what we can afford, then plan the project, and not the other way around. The decisions and strategies I've just outlined have put Ottawa in the solid financial position it is in today. These tested strategies will be used to strengthen every decision we make together as a council. Of course, we'll continue to push ourselves even further. We need to be even more innovative by finding efficiencies and striking partnerships. We will need to collaborate at the community level by getting input into our work and helping to prioritize projects. Together, as a team, I know we will have the skill to accomplish this and keep Ottawa on a strong financial footing. This starts, of course, with Budget 2015. En travaillant en équipe, je sais que nous pouvons accomplir.
By working together, I know that we can accomplish everything we want to do while keeping Ottawa in a strong financial footing.
Affordable city. Let's begin by talking about how we will keep life affordable for residents. Today we are tabling a budget that proposes a 1.75% tax revenue increase. This continues the multi-year trend of keeping life affordable and translates into a 2% average increase for a residential property owner. This rate will allow us to continue to invest in key priorities such as transportation, affordable housing, and community facilities. It also requires no significant service cuts to achieve. Cette augmentation moyenne de 2
This average increase of 2% will allow us to continue to invest in our priorities in transportation, affordable housing, and community facilities, without having to make significant cuts to services.
Now, some people out there may ask us to spend more to push the rate even higher. Others will argue that we should freeze taxes and slash services. But I think we've struck the right balance, because we know that there are many living close to the line. Those who may have unstable or no employment, for whom raising taxes significantly could mean the difference between affording the next mortgage payment or affording food for their kids. We must also not abandon those same folks on the service side by cutting the core programs and services on which they demand. This is a reasonable budget that respects taxpayers' ability to pay while maintaining high-quality public services. The budget also proposes to limit the average OC Transpo fare increase to just 2.5%. As you know, this is in line with our multi-year affordability plan for investments like the Confederation Line, O-Train expansion, and other improvements with the bus system. Le budget prévoit aussi de
The budget also proposes to limit the average OC Transpo fare increase to just 2.5%. This will allow us to maintain our investments in the Confederation Line and the expansion of the O-Train also.
This will also allow us to invest an additional $4.2 million in the base budget this year for increased bus service and trips on Paratranspo and the O-Train Trillium Line. In 2013, we reduced the garbage collection fee by 11%. It's been frozen ever since. Budget 2015 recommends we continue that freeze for a third consecutive year. Furthermore, after freezing recreation fees for the past 4 years, users will now see fee increases capped at an average of 2%. This is a prudent way to move forward. This is to ensure we can continue providing high-quality programming while absorbing inflationary costs and other operational pressures such as new facilities in the east, west, and south. Budget 2015 will see us continuing to manage our debt level responsibly. We will protect our excellent credit ratings of AAA from Moody's and AA Plus from Standard & Poor. Ottawa continues to have an excellent credit rating, a manageable debt level well within the established limits, both provincially and municipally, and will continue to have one of the lowest debts per capita among major Canadian cities. Nous continuons à avoir
Ottawa will continue to have an excellent credit rating, and we will continue to have one of the lowest debt loads among Canadian cities.
There's nothing more important to our local economy than the strength of our infrastructure. Our prosperity depends on it. When Ottawa's moving, our economy is moving. Over the last 3 years, our Ottawa on the Move program saw over 400 infrastructure projects completed in all areas of the city. And it would be hard to ignore how significant this investment was as we advanced many years' worth of renewal work than previously planned. Many streets were reconstructed that had been ignored for far too long. This included significant sewer and water main work. In several cases, we closed major gaps in our pedestrian and cycling networks. We undertook this $500 million investment to ensure that there was less road work to do during the height of the Confederation Line construction in 2015 and 2016. As you know, we will not be able to continue with the same intensity or level of spending over this term of council. It would be logistically and financially challenging to do so. However, we will continue to invest what we can to maintain our roads, pathways, sidewalks, and sewers. Comme vous le savez,
as you know, we will not be able to continue with the same intensity or level of spending over this term of council, but we will continue to invest the necessary money to maintain our streets, our roads, and our infrastructures.
Examples. In the West End, Ottawa on the Move funded road work on Woodruff, Baseline, Huntmar, and West Hunt Club Road. Budget 2015 will build on these investments, increasing our network capacity to address growth such as a new 4-lane extension of Campo Drive to Huntmar. The city will also break ground on the hospital link, which will help to resolve some of the congestion on Smythe Road and Alta Vista Drive. Critical renewal projects remain a priority, such as the reconstruction of Banning Road and Anderson Bridge. As well, we will continue to make key intersection enhancements to improve efficiency, as well as improving safety and connectivity. This will be seen through work such as the urbanization and implementation of a multi-youth pathway on a small orphan stretch of Klondike Road. We'll also move forward with culvert and sewer improvements for Shea Road, Flowing Creek, the Canada West Pump Station, and the Fernbank Sanitary Sewer. The Western Transitway expansion will also go forward as planned in 2015. We'll continue our investments towards the completion of the $65 million Bayshore to Moody Transitway, a project that is 100% municipally funded. This project will significantly improve bus service from Canada by providing a new segregated transitway along a stretch of the 417 where buses are currently intermingling with car traffic. In the Central Core, Ottawa on the Move saw much-needed infrastructure work such as Churchill, Bronson, Carling, and St. Patrick. This is an area of the city with some of our oldest infrastructure. In fact, the pipes replaced under Bronson Avenue were about 160 years old. The city also made permanent the Laurier Avenue segregated bike lanes and built the east-west bikeway linking Beechwood with Westboro. Budget 2015 proposes that we proceed with the full integrated renewal of Main Street as a complete street. It will also invest in the renewal of the Minto Bridges, McRae Avenue, McElwraith Bridge, and McLeod Street, to name just a few. The Central Core is also due for Recreation Community Centre improvements in 2015. We'll move forward with repairs at the Don Gamble Recreation Centre, the Jim Durrell Recreation Complex, Brewer Arena, Canterbury Pool, the Michelle Heights Community Centre, and the Dempsey Community Centre. Budget 2015 also proposes we continue to provide better cycling and pedestrian facilities in the core. Budget 2015 will begin funding the public realm of the Rideau Street Art Precinct with the conversion of Nicholas between Bessemer and Rideau into a pedestrian street. It will also include early works towards making Rideau Street a more attractive, vibrant, and people-friendly environment in advance of the opening of LRT in 2018. This month, we will open the new pedestrian bridge over Highway 417 near Coventry Road. And we will also continue to build the Somerset-Donald pedestrian and cycling bridge over the Rideau River for completion next year. In the East End, Ottawa on the Move funded renewal projects such as Jeanne d'Arc, Ogilvie Road, and Stonehenge Road. Nous continuons la construction de ponts.
We will also continue to build a Somerset-Donald pedestrian and cycling bridge over the Rideau River for completion next year. In the east of the city, Ottawa on the Move funded renewal projects such as Jeanne d'Arc, Ogilvie Road, and Stonehenge Road.
Work continues on the Orleans water main link to bring a new source of drinking water to improve service reliability to this East End community. This project is expected to be completed this year. With the support of our provincial partners, we also undertook the much-needed Highway 417 expansion project to fix the split. In the short term, this will provide an alternate transitway corridor as we move to the next phase of construction of the Confederation Line. In the draft budget, it is proposed that the city continue this momentum by building a new two-lane extension of Brian Coburn Boulevard between Navan and Mare Bleue. We'll also renew key bridges and overpasses such as Carlsbad Lane, Sand Road, and Birch Grove Beckett's Creek. As you know, recent years saw significant East End Recreation Centre improvements, including Richcraft Sensplex East and the François Dupuis Pool. Au cours des dernières années,
recent years have seen significant East End Recreation Centre improvements, including Richcraft Sensplex East and the François Dupuis Pool.
Ahead, Budget 2015 proposes that we invest in upgrading key community assets such as the Ray Friel Recreation Centre, Pierre Rock Park, the Avalon South Recreational Pathway, Park 18A in Cardinal Creek, and Cassandra Park. In our South End, we recently saw the opening of the Vimy Memorial Bridge and the Airport Parkway Bridge. Residents have already told us that these linkages have greatly improved mobility. Ottawa on the Move also provided South Enders with renewal of road infrastructure on Albion Road and Fisher Avenue, as well as the expansion of Jockville Road. Budget 2015 will see us complete the renewal of the Prince of Wales overpass at Nepean Creek, the Mansfield Road Bridge, and the Parkway Road Bridge over Castor. On the recreation front, we'll replace the artificial turf at Minto Field and complete maintenance at facilities such as the Richmond Arena, the Nepean Sportsplex, and the Pinecrest Recreation Complex. On a citywide basis, Budget 2015 will continue to build momentum with several significant infrastructure projects that will improve our city for generations to come. Let me just take a moment to talk about a few. Firstly, we'll continue to make progress on the final phase of the Ottawa River Action Plan this year. This has been Council's top environmental priority for quite some time, and I'm very pleased that we're able to secure provincial funding in last year's budget. We'll also continue momentum with light rail transit in the nation's capital. Budget 2015 will allow us to continue construction on the Confederation Line and continue to refine our plans to advance Stage 2 of LRT. À l'échelle de la ville, nous
On a citywide basis, Budget 2015 will also continue to build momentum with several significant infrastructure projects which will improve our city for generations to come. Firstly, we'll continue to make progress on the final phase of the Ottawa River Action Plan, Stage 2 of the LR2 also.
Proud moment when we unveiled a model of the Alstom Citadis Spirit train that will run on the Confederation Line at Lansdowne Park. More than 1,000 people visited the train over the course of the first weekend, and they had their first tangible interaction with this exciting project. Many people are saying this is finally for real. The LRT Showcase is an important way that residents can get a better understanding of the project, especially as we manage the challenges associated with construction in the coming year. We'll begin to prepare for the completion of the project with finishing the maintenance and storage facility so that the assembly of our vehicles can begin. We'll also start initial work on the operations side of the Confederation Line, including practical investments for fare control and the control center. We'll also break ground on 2 Ottawa 2017 legacy projects this year, the Innovation Center at Bayview and the revitalized Arts Court. Each of these will have a unique role to play in helping Ottawa remain competitive and dynamic in the years to come. These will be citywide assets that will bring people together to celebrate, create, and innovate.
These initiatives will bring people together to celebrate, create, and also innovate.
Third is a caring city. As we continue to build this world-class city, we'll continue to focus our efforts on the human side of the services that we provide. That begins with looking after our most vulnerable. Budget 2015 proposes that the City of Ottawa continue its base budget commitment of $14 million annually that we began last year. The draft budget also proposes an additional investment of $3.1 million annually for maintenance for Ottawa community housing. In addition, Council will also consider a capital investment of $19 million for affordable housing. We need to take care of our housing stock, and this will help us continue to do that.
It's important we continue to assist our most vulnerable and high-risk residents. This is why we will maintain our investments in social and community services and also in affordable housing.
We'll continue to invest more money to help with the challenges we are facing with guns and gangs in our city. It is important to remember that Ottawa is a safe city and that the Ottawa Police Service has our full support in the work it is doing on this important file. Through our conversations with the police, Crime Prevention Ottawa, and their network of community partners, we identified a funding gap that needs to be addressed. Too many at-risk individuals at different stages of involvement in gang activity do so because they simply feel they have no option. We need to help them open their eyes to options available. Budget 2015 allocates $400,000 annually to fund in a combination of exit strategies and employment opportunities for at-risk individuals. We'll not solve this complicated social problem in just a year, but it is our hope that with these funds we can continue to move in the right direction. In 2015, we must also continue to rebuild our tree cover that has been ravaged by the emerald ash borer. To this end, the draft budget proposes we invest $5.6 million in forestry efforts this year, including an additional $125,000 for tree planting. The budget investments I've outlined so far are just the beginning of how we will improve the lives of Ottawa residents over the coming years. There will be another opportunity, as you all know, through our strategic initiatives process later this spring to make additional investments in our communities. As you know, our budget process is a little different following an election. Because of this, the time frames for budget delivery change from fall to the new year. Because of this, we have not yet had the important opportunities to talk about our term of council priorities. We will do this over the coming months. Nous aurons d'autres occasions d'investir.
There will be another opportunity through our strategic initiatives process later this spring to make additional investments in our communities.
First step, Budget 2015 proposes a funding envelope of $37.4 million combined operating and capital for strategic initiatives. Later this spring, as Council approves its term of Council priorities, we will decide where this money is allocated. It is my expectation that some of these funds will be also used for continued priorities, such as improve recreation services, including greater support for our hard-working volunteer rink operators, Invest Ottawa in supporting our local startups, housing and homelessness, ward-based road safety initiatives, and better pedestrian and cycling connectivity, particularly in our suburban communities. And these are just a few of the possibilities. If you do not see a project or a priority funded in this draft budget, it is my hope to work with you to see it realized either in strategic initiatives, a future budget, or by another source. As you know, the successes we see in our budget could not be accomplished without our city manager, treasurer, and the management team. With their knowledge of the day-to-day affairs of the city, we are able to find savings without impacting service levels. For example, the City of Ottawa has been able to reduce its headcount of full-time equivalents, FTEs, in every budget in the last 3 years for a net total of approximately 200 fewer FTEs. This has been managed despite the fact that we're still a growing city. This year is no different, as Budget 2015 proposes to reduce the FTE count by an additional 20. Le directeur municipal.
The city manager and his team, his management team, have done an excellent job. They have assisted us in reaching our goals and in finding savings without impacting the services we provide to residents.
The manager and his team will be undertaking an important management effort to look ahead at 2016 and beyond. I mentioned earlier that we saw significant savings from our Service Ottawa program in recent years to the tune of approximately $40 million. These savings in turn created capacity to fund inflationary cost increases, the costs of growth, and the term of council priorities. Now that this program has realized its efficiencies, city management needs to refocus their efforts on longer-term planning to ensure we remain financially sustainable. We must look beyond the immediate 12-month window of traditional budgeting and model our decision-making in a multi-year approach. City Council will continue to enact a budget every year. However, management will need to look at a multi-year perspective. This will help identify savings needed to fund priorities, keep taxes under control, fund growth, and meet inflationary pressures. The city manager will provide more comment and context on this approach following my remarks. Chers collègues, merci.
Colleagues, thank you for taking part in this budget process. It strikes the right balance. It increases income, revenue in a responsible fashion while maintaining services and investments that are required to continue to build a world-class city.
Thank you for your contributions to this budget. I'm confident that Budget 2015 strikes the right balance. It raises revenue in a responsible way while maintaining the services and investments required to build on our city's momentum. Members of the public will have 16 opportunities for public input, in addition to any ward meetings that you will be holding individually above and beyond our 4 regional meetings and our standing committee meetings. All documents on the budget, the complete budget, will be available on ottawa.ca as of 11 a.m. this morning. Thank you, and now over to our city manager and treasurer for their presentations. Mr. Kirkpatrick, please.
Merci, Monsieur le Maire.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Ladies and gentlemen, members of council, thank you for giving your comments and suggestions for the development of the 2015 budget.
For engaging so thoroughly in the process, and especially that process of the individual meetings was very, very productive and assisted staff significantly in developing the budget that we're tabling for you today. As the Mayor said, we continue to grow as a city, and I believe Council can be proud of how this budget that is tabled for your consideration moves the city forward in many important areas and in many important priorities. As Council knows, it is a 365-day-a-year job to manage the finances of the Corporation of the City of Ottawa in accordance with Council's priorities. The annual budget is the centerpiece of that effort and the point of reference for our actions throughout the ensuing year, so it is of central importance. Your Treasurer, Marion Similek, and your Deputy City Managers, Nancy Shepherd and Steve Kanalakis, work long and hard every year on the annual budget. And behind each of them are their teams of dedicated department heads and managers whose commitment to our city, I believe, is evident in the critical work that they do every year to develop a budget for Council consideration. J'ai le plaisir aujourd'hui de présenter.
I am pleased today to give now the microphone to Marion, who will give you the details of the budget.
Marion, I want to talk briefly about the need for ongoing budget work in this year that will need to begin immediately following Council's adoption of the 2015 budget. As the Mayor indicated in his comments, we need to focus on some longer-term budget work. Your past and current direction as a Council includes financial sustainability as an ongoing priority for the City. And the definition from staff's perspective of financial sustainability is that includes providing services and closing the infrastructure funding deficit in accordance with Council's policy direction, while limiting required increases to roughly an inflationary level. In the last 4 years, as the Mayor mentioned, the City invested in technology with the Service Ottawa initiative, and that program realized operating savings that, in conjunction with other productivity improvements made by management, created capacity to fund inflationary cost increases, the cost of growth, as well as the priorities that Council identified for new and expanded program spending. But technology improvements to Service Ottawa have now been completed, and there's a limited ability to find additional savings with that program. In order to ensure that the City remains financially sustainable, there is a need to refocus on longer-term operational budget planning. We must look beyond the immediate 12-month window of traditional operating budgeting and model decision-making and move to a multi-year approach. A concerted multi-year budget approach will help identify savings needed to fund Council's priorities, keep tax increases under control, fund growth, and meet inflationary pressures. And this multi-year budget approach and review for the years 2016, 2017, and 2018 will begin immediately by management after the adoption of the 2015 budget. And that work isn't new work. It's the same work that management does on an ongoing basis. But what I'm describing and what the Mayor was describing is a change in process. Simply, as we know that this work by management to find the capacity to absorb budgetary pressures is becoming more difficult, more time started earlier will be required to accomplish it. So the results of that work, the first results of that work, will be reported to Council later this year with the 2016 Budget Guidelines report. Finally, we need to do important work this year related to reviewing the current pricing structure of our water and sewer utility services, and the Treasurer will touch on this as well in her presentation. As returning councillors know, declining water consumption patterns and revenues are driving a mounting pressure on this budget. And this is a fiscal challenge that almost all major municipalities are also presently facing. Staff will report to Council in the second quarter with recommendations regarding this important policy issue. So we will have important ongoing work to complete, budget work to complete, following the adoption of the budget 2015. And I wanted to be sure that everyone was aware, Council and management and the public, that our work does not end with Council's adoption of this budget. Mayor, councillors, let me conclude by restating my thanks to each of you, and also allow me to say a thank you to all staff members who have worked on this budget. It is important work, and I truly appreciate each individual's effort. I will now ask Marion Simlick to take you through the details of the 2015 draft budget. Thank you.
Thank you, Kent. The presentation I'm going to give you is an overview of all the budgets that are in front of you today combined. So it includes the police, public health, library, transit commission, all of them together. The documents, this is the only summary that you have in front of you, because each of them is presented individually and will go to their commissions. And once they're all approved, we then roll them up. But just to give you an idea of what they all look like together and the impact it has, that's the purpose of this presentation. So we'll quickly review your budget directions, the impact that had. We'll look at all the tax and rate supported operating budgets combined, then the capital budgets, and then quickly review the budget timetable for those people who may be watching this at home and would like to get involved. So the budget directions were approved in December, and the main one you gave us was to limit the municipal portion of the residential property tax bill to 2%. While it's 2% on a residential bill, that means overall tax revenues are only increasing by 1.75, and that is because of provincial policy that limits how much a tax increase we can pass on to the commercial class. The boards and commissions were all directed to develop their budgets with the same objective, and I'm pleased to report that they have. There were operating and capital strategic initiatives. The funding for them was to be established in this budget as an envelope. So there are no details. It's just sitting there as an envelope. And as the mayor indicated, you will be entering a process to allocate those funds shortly after the budget is finished. We also were directed to continue to contribute to the capital program to get to a level, hopefully in the next few years, where we are able to maintain our assets in a good state of repair. And user fees were to increase as indicated in the long-range financial plan and the fiscal framework. Le budget préliminaire de 2015 atteint l'objectif.
The preliminary 2015 budget limits tax hikes to 10%. For a person owning a house in an urban area, of which the average valuation is $335,000. The increase will correspond to $67 per year for municipal services. The impact, of course, the impact is preliminary, but the actual impact will be based on the actual evaluation of properties. And changes to the fiscal policy adopted by the Council before the finalization of tax rates. Because of the restrictions imposed in the provincial tax policy, the increase of property taxes is lower than other hikes. This is limited to 1.75%.
The increase being proposed for the water and sewer, the rate budgets as we refer to them, is 6%, and this was identified in the long-range financial plan that was adopted in 2012. For an average household with a yearly consumption of 220 cubic meters of water, this represents an annual increase of approximately $48. I'll touch later on what Kent referred to as the impacts of the declining consumption in the water and sewer budgets. Le budget préliminaire qui ont été déposés.
The preliminary budget, as tabled, takes into account various FTE positions. These are required to provide municipal services in 2015. For all services, we need a total of 15,087 FTEs. This is a net reduction of 7 FTPs based on 2011 levels. Municipal operations and transportation services, library services and public health services will lose 20 FTEs, and the police service will recommend an increase of 12 FTEs.
So in total, this corporation has a gross budget of $3.073 billion. And if you look at this particular representation, you'll note that there are lots of slivers, there are lots of segments, just representing the myriad number of services that this city provides. And if you look at the sort of the top four, you'll see the juxtaposition of the types of services we provide, because the top four are transit, so a bus company, community and social services, so your welfare agency, water and sewer services, which is a vital service in this community, and finally police. So a lot of dollars, but a lot of services as well. The next graphic shows you how we fund those 3.073, and you'll note there's not as many slivers on this particular representation. We really only have two sources of funds. We have taxpayers, and we have those people who use the services. What you see for federal and provincial funding on this is all grants that are directed toward particular services, their share of social services, their share of child care, etc. So they're not available to us to use for any other purposes. So really you have user fees and service charges and property taxes as the main sources of revenue to support the operations of this corporation. We'll quickly look at the operating budgets. The funding capacity that's been created as a result of tax increases, user fee increases, savings that the corporation has been able to find, and revenue that we're receiving from other levels of government, etc., totals $88.7 million. Of that, user fees and charges on, and this would be for non-transit services, is $3.7 million, which includes, for the first time in 4 years, an increase in your recreation fees. Transit fares, the 2.5% that's being recommended, generates $2.4 million, and that 2.5% increase keeps transit users, their revenue cost ratio, at the same level as it was in 2014. So they were paying 53% of the operating costs with transit fares in 2014, and that continues even though the rate of increase is 2.5% in 2015. Service initiatives and savings, $3.8 million. The majority of that is actually in the police area. And as Kent has indicated, there is work that needs to be undertaken to look at this particular category and what we can do for upcoming budgets. The provincial upload, the province continues to take over more funding responsibility for the Ontario Works program, and in 2015 that relieves the taxpayer of $4.7 million of funding. The provincial and other revenues is fairly significant in this budget because there's a number of programs where the province is doing additional things in 2015, and that's resulted in, for example, child care. There's a large amount in there because they promised that the child care workers would get an increase in their wages. That's included in this $24.9 million. Tax and assessment growth, we are projecting a 1.75% increase in the value of the assessment roll, which generates $24.6 million in taxes. And then the 1.75% overall tax revenue increase, which is 2% on residential, generates another $24.6 million. So the first thing we do with the money, the funding capacity that we have, is we look to maintain the existing services that we're already providing. So labor costs, as usual, are our largest increase overall, and this is to be expected given the fact that 44% of our overall costs in the city are related to labor. Inflation on fuel, materials, and contracts is 6.7, and this 6.7 million is net of reductions in the budget that we have taken for diesel fuel, both in OC Transpo and in Public Works. There is the inflationary increase in your reserves, which is your contribution to capital. This is just straight keeping up with inflation so that you're not losing ground in terms of what you need to do for your capital assets. And then there are prior year adjustments. Every year we look at what happened in the previous year, where were there revenue increases that we hadn't anticipated, which we can build into the budget, where were there service program adjustments that we need to reflect, and those in total generate 7.9. The biggest piece of that, though, is what you approved in December for Ottawa Community Housing, where you basically eliminated property taxation as a requirement for them. That saves the city $3.1 million, which you will be reinvesting in a later slide. So growth, we have $9.6 million dedicated toward growth in 2015. The Minto Recreation Center, which opened in late 2014, there's another $2.7 million needed for the full year costs of that center. There's a corporate radio modernization program, which is $1.3 million. Public health has a small amount. Para and transit service, there's both hours increase and annualization of service increase that you implemented in 2014. That totals $3.2 million. And then the Trillium service, the increase for the full year cost annualization there is an additional $1 million. Your provincial and legislative costs are $23.7 million in total. The biggest items in there are the biggest item in there is your housing programs. We are required to provide increases to the social housing providers based on an index that the province gives us. As you saw in a previous slide, there is significant revenue coming in from the provincial government as well, but in the housing program, that $11.6 million only nets down to $9.5 million. So $9.5 million increase on the tax side for the social housing program. Child care program, which has 9.5, effectively nets to zero because almost all of that is covered by increases from the province. You also have, as of course, the Municipal Property Assessment Corporation has a small increase, and you have some requirements for some fleet safety officers as a result of some change in legislation. Council priorities, there is $18.2 million identified. First off, there's $5.4 million that we've set aside in the operating budget for your council priorities. That is the upload this year and a portion of the upload from 2014 that was used on a one-time basis and is being identified to be put into the hopper for consideration when you do your term of council priorities. The $5.4 million increase to your contribution to capital, which is your attempt to try to get to investment in capital that maintains our assets in a good state of repair. In 2014 as well, you approved your new DC rates, and as part of that, you approved that when we provide exemptions for landowners from development charges, the city would make up that contribution so that the development charges reserves would have sufficient revenues in them to fund all of the growth works that need to take place. So we have started with this. This is not the full amount that needs to be, in our estimate, contributed, but we've started with a contribution of $1.4 million in 2015. As I mentioned before, the Ottawa Community Housing Corporation exempting them from properties allows you to redirect $3.1 million that were previously going to education taxes now to be used for life cycle funding. As the Mayor mentioned, the gang exit strategy has been included at $400,000, and then there are a number of police initiatives of $2.3 million. The police will be providing a presentation after this, and you're more than welcome to ask them questions about that number. The rate budget. So the rate increase is 6%. So you would think on a $300 million budget that would generate somewhere in the tune of $18 million. In fact, it's only generating $7 million because we have reduced the consumption estimates that are in the rate budget to be closer to what we experienced in 2014. And we are seeing dramatic decreases overall in terms of water consumption. So $7 million is still a significant amount for an increase, but when you look at where we have to spend it, your labor costs take 2.1. It ends up that the increase to contribution to capital is only 3.9 million. That's not in line with where you need to be as per your long-range financial plan. This is an asset-intensive service. The biggest thing you do in this area is rehabilitate pipes and plant. So the 3.9%, while it is an increase, has meant that what we had planned to do, projects we had planned to fund with cash in 2015, now need to be funded with debt. So as Kent had indicated, there needs to be a relook at how we actually charge for this valuable service in our community, and we'll be bringing that back to you later this year. Capital budgets. In the last term of council, you did a variety, or that council did a variety of major studies that they approved, which inform the capital budgets for this year and for the following 3 years. So there was the Transportation Master Plan that was adopted. You did the Development Charges Background Study. You had long-range financial plans that looked at the state of repairs of all of the capital assets that you own, and those have all been incorporated into what you see in 2015 and the subsequent 3 years. We have also ensured that we have the funding envelope for the council priorities, because the $5.4 million that we set aside in operating is not all that you will be dealing with. There was, in the previous term, a $20 million envelope set aside for strategic initiatives, and that plus additional funds we were able to secure because of our endowment fund, we will have $32 million set aside for council's use when setting their term of council priorities. Debt always is a contentious issue. We are using debt again in this. We are using it as described and limited by council in the long-range financial plans. We are under the 7.5% debt servicing limits and the for tax and the 15% for rate. We are at 5.3. On the tax side, and on the rate side, 8.8% of their revenues are being used to service debt. Their limit is 15%. Les autorisations.
Capital budget 2015, and that's for public transit, for police services, and the public library in 2015. Well, we're talking about $404.7 million. The capital budget for water and sewer programs stands at $260.1 million. The capital budget mainly is required to renew our infrastructure. That represents 80% of our capital budget for water and sewer.
$689 million capital budget, and it is funded from a variety of sources, but basically it's cash and debt. You have reserves, your cash portion, and you have development charges, also cash, and some revenues coming in from the province, particularly for your investment in affordable housing, and we've identified revenues from the province for the Ottawa River Action Plan, the Central Storage Tunnel, which is included in this budget as well. In total, there's $182 million in debt. That $177 is on rate and tax supported, but within the development charges, there is $5 million in DC debt. But that $182 million in debt is still in line with what you have improved in previous years. So quickly on the budget timetable. As you know, we have 4 meetings, combined meetings starting next week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Members of the public are more than welcome to attend these. We will be giving a brief overview of the budgets at these and answering questions and listening to their comments, but that's not the end of where council or the public can get involved. We have the budget meetings scheduled, starting the first one on the 17th, running all the way up till the March 5th. So this is the point in time where if individuals want to make a representation to a committee to talk about a particular item, this is their opportunity. So we'll be publicizing this. It's all the information is available on the web, inviting the public to come out either at a ward meeting or at a committee meeting to discuss things that are of concern to them. And as well, you're able to provide, the public is able to provide information and feedback using a variety of methods. There's an email box, register for a meeting. You can, there's a hashtag, call 311, there's a fax line. As many formats as possible we're trying to provide to encourage public participation. The budgets are going to be available online. They're at the client service centers and they will be at the libraries as well. In conclusion, Mr. Mayor, I would like to offer my thanks this year. The budget's always a very difficult time for finance because it's a lot of work, but this year is particularly difficult because we do budget and year-end at the exact same time. And I want to give my thanks out to the members of finance who work in the financial service units. That's led by Brian Flynn, but these are the people who during the day we're trying to both handle doing year-end processing and dealing with the requests to input on budget and get numbers in, and they perform magnificently as usual, and so my heartfelt thanks goes to all of them.
Great, thank you very much. Councillor Taylor and Monette have a motion.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to move that it be resolved that the Mayor's remarks given at a City Council meeting on February 4th, 2015 be appended to the minutes of today's Council meeting. Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Monette.
Carried. Thank you. To members of council who have asked to speak, as you know, we're going to go through all the presentations first with our outside boards and agencies, and then we'll go back to high-level questions on what was presented to the Treasurer. So we'll get to that as soon as we have our guests. And our first item is the Ottawa Police Service, and we have Councillor Eli El-Shantiri, who is the Chair, Chief Charles Bordelot, and Deborah Fraser, who is the Director General. And welcome, Mr. Chair. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Your Worship. And I'd like to begin by thanking my colleague, Councillor Harder, and attorney, and also the civilian member on our board. And we're still in waiting for another member to join us. I want to thank you, Your Worship, this morning for announcing what we talk about in many times with you on the exit strategy and finding that funding available. So I want to thank the Deputy City Manager and your team for being able to work together on that important item to us. So today, Mr. Mayor, early this morning, the board received the draft budget from the Ottawa Police Service 2015. This budget ensures the Ottawa Police Service can continue to provide the policing services residents expected. It is in line with the request from the City Council to constrain any tax increase on residential taxpayer. The police service continued to work to ensure that its deployment and operation are as efficient as possible. This work had allowed us, the service, to manage. And today you're going to hear from the Chief and the Director General about our budget. So I'll turn it over to Chief Bordelot.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mayor, members of council, bonjour. C'est un plaisir d'être parmi vous
It's a great pleasure for me to be here today to introduce our 2015 budget.
Policing services for. Our members have a difficult and rewarding job, and they keep our communities safe in urban, suburban, and rural settings. It's a job that can be dangerous. These areas all have unique service needs, and we must adjust to and plan for. At the same time, the location of the federal government and areas of national importance pose other unique policing requirements. We deal with hundreds of events and demonstrations each year. Our members must also be operationally ready to deal with attacks like we saw on October 22, 2014. We have estimated that the responsibilities associated with these unique policing needs in the capital represents about $2 million of the total police service budget. The Board and City Council will be seeking the renewal of the federal grant to offset these costs. This budget was prepared by taking into account a number of factors affecting policing in Ottawa beyond geography. Our population is growing, our communities are expanding, and new housing developments continue to be built that require service. We are operating in an environment where reported crime rates have fallen, calls for service have decreased, and budgets are constrained even as costs of maintaining policing services rise. Our focus is on preventing and investigating crime, but we continue to see growing expectations from citizens and service demands that are not always about crime. For example, our officers are the first and primary service to assist with people in crisis, often involving mental health issues. Addictions, homelessness, and other societal issues often require police intervention. These interventions are complex and time-consuming. We need to ensure our members have the resources to deal with emerging crime trends like guns and gangs and cyber and internet-based crimes while guarding against a changing threat environment. As our community expands and needs grow in complexity, we must also ensure that the necessary patrol resources are in place. We do see an increase in the complexity of crime and the complexity of investigating and solving crimes. Criminals have new technologies available to them that we need to deal with. We must also continue to develop and maintain skills and expertise needed to support new investigative technologies and police equipment. There is an increased workload on our members, and we have a responsibility to find more efficient ways to do this work and leverage technology. That's why the Service Initiative program we launched a couple of years ago is so important. By looking at new approaches, best practices, and bringing in new technologies, we have been producing efficiencies and maximizing our deployment model to meet the growing needs of our community. Another standard measure that we hear about a lot is a comparison used in Canada of population per police member. Population growth in Ottawa, combined with the static size of the police service, has caused the number of residents supported by a police member to grow since 2010, from 466 to 494. This is in the low range of the 12 larger urban centres in Canada. Ottawa is a safe city. Notre ville est sauf.
Our city is safe.
Continue to focus on three priorities affecting safety in Ottawa. We've increased our resources assigned to the guns and gangs with more investigators and officers focused on enforcement and suppression. This coincides with our partnerships in the community aimed at dissuading young people and young adults from the criminal gang lifestyle. We are working with community groups to raise awareness about violence against women, changing attitudes, and improve services to women who have been victimized. And the topic of traffic safety continues to rank amongst the top priorities of residents. Recently, with our partnerships with Safer Roads Ottawa, we have been raising awareness on the dangers of texting and driving with our Leave the Phone Alone campaign. Safer Roads is a good example of our strong partnership with the city. Overall, this budget maintains policing services to our citizens. It follows our board direction of a 1.75% tax percent increase. There are no changes in materials, supply, and services-based budgets. $2.5 million in efficiencies and new revenues have been identified, and it lays the foundation for our MIT roadmap to ensure that we have the technology to meet the growing needs of our police service. I'll now turn it over to our Director General, Deborah Fraser.
Much, Chief. At the end of the day, the police service operating budget represents an $8 million increase for 2015, and you can see in the way that the pressures are grouped that the largest pressure is coming from the maintain category of the budget. So in order to maintain services, in fact, we need $8.2 million. What that's starting to show is that for us in the police world, in order to provide any new services, we need to find efficiencies from within to offset that pressure. So it's a very simple proposition. And it's not surprising that we'll be investing most of the budget increase in compensation. For the police service, compensation represents about 83% of salaries and benefits, and those include as well the usual steps through the increment scale, responsibility pay, as well as a provision for the 2015 expected salary settlement. And non-compensation, the non-compensation aspect in maintain deals with an item that the Treasurer already highlighted. In 2015, the new city radio system becomes operational, and that $0.9 million represents our share of bringing the radio system and the equipment online. There are no pressures coming this year for us from provincially legislated needs, nor is there any pressure from growth. What you see in the $2.3 million of new service requests is the start of our IMIT roadmap work. We've been working with experts over the last 6 to 8 months to identify the kind of IT backbone and IT information management strategies that Ottawa Police needs to bring to the table in order to support the kind of transformation that's expected over the future. IT will be a key way that we continue to achieve $2 million worth of savings annually. And there's the $2 million target for 2015. It's coming about as a result of initiatives under our service initiative project. About $1.5 million will come from that grouping in the program. We've also identified about $500,000 to $600,000 by reviewing the fleet. There's a significant work underway to look at a new model for our fleet that is sustainable, that is economic and efficient. The last balancer for our budget is user fees and charges. The board has a bylaw which recommends that user fees be adjusted to keep pace with inflation, and that brings the bottom line net increase on the police budget to $8 million. As a best practice, starting about 5 years ago, the Auditor General recommended that the police include a 3-year forecast in that budget. So we've been doing that for several years now. Here's what the forecast looks like for the 2016 to 2018 period. You can see that growth is returning. There's about a $2 million annual provision for growth. That's built around a plan to add 25 sworn officers annually to the budget. As well, you'll see the service initiative is included at $2 million as well, and that is there to help offset the new services and needs that are identified for the forecast period. And once again, that's a very simple requirement. It's OPS launching the implementation of the IT IM roadmap. We'll be bringing that plan forward through the board committee and approval process so that we can share the kinds of plans that are underway to help modernize the IT base at Ottawa Police. With assessment base contributing $4 million annually, the expected police tax rate increase under that scenario, and it's a forecast, is between 2.6% and 2.8% annually. On the capital side of the capital budget is a little higher than normal for us. Usually we're just under $10 million. We're at $15.8 million this year. You can see there are no growth projects planned for 2015. In fact, what we see happening is about $7 million being applied to the renewal of our assets in the police world. That's fleet, facilities, and IT infrastructure. And what's starting to become more predominant in the budget, and it's about $9 million, is investment according to the 2 plans that the board adopted. There's a facility strategic plan which the board adopted in 2012. The projects in there, the realignment of Swansea, courts, and some other protective initiatives account for about half of the $9 million we'll invest, and you see a preliminary estimate of what it will take to implement the backbone foundation work in the IMIT roadmap. Virtually all of that work is funded from pay-as-you-go. It shows a small debt requirement now, but in fact we expect to eliminate that when we review that project. In terms of the forecast, I'm sorry. We're not going to do. We're not going to do the forecast. That's it. Thank you very much.
Great. So thank you very much, Ms. Fraser, Chief Bordelow, Chair El Shantiri. At this point, we have an opportunity to ask high-level questions, not getting into the details, because that will be done at the appropriate time with the boards and the public meetings. So do the members who have pushed their button have questions to the police? Councillor Shirelli, so if you can, we'll remove him. Councillor Eglai to the police, high level. Councillor Eglai?
No, it was...
Okay, you have to turn your mic off then. Okay. All right. So thank you very much. Next is the library. Chair Tierney and Danielle MacDonald from the Ottawa Public Library have their presentation, followed by the Health Board, and then we go back to Committee of Adjustment and Crime Prevention Ottawa and FTE analysis. So congratulations to Councillor Tierney, who was just elected as Chair of the Library Board last week, and welcome Ms. MacDonald. The floor is yours, Chair Tierney.
Great. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. First of all, I did want to say thank you to the outgoing Chair, Councillor Harder. She's done a wonderful job and put us on a good footing for the future, so thank you for that. First of all, this is a very good budget, and I didn't slip the Central Library into this budget. We're being very frugal on this budget. We're looking at many aspects. First of all, we're respecting the Council guidelines, which is very important. It aligns with the Board's strategic priorities, and it fulfills the mandates and requirements that we've been given. As you can see on the screen, there's $1.028 million was the directive given by Council in December 2014, and this has been achieved, giving us a net operating request of $14.651 million. As you can see, the approximately $1 million set out. First, we're paying our obligations. A majority of the money is going to COLA. Second, technology. And finally, licensing and maintenance. There is a revenue shortfall of about $90,000, and this is due to the fact we've reduced the fines that we've collected overall. This is due to the fact that our email notifications are reminding people on a regular basis to pay their fines, and secondly, that our e-books automatically disappear at the end of the loan period. We're taking a phased approach in addressing this pressure. We are also making a transfer from capital to operating to comply with TCAR. It creates a permanent funding for two accounts: furniture, equipment, and general repairs. Secondly, technology, equipment, life cycle, that's replacing of computers, mobile devices, etc. We're permanently moving funds that creates the permanently moving the funds creates a reduction in our pay-as-you-go envelope. I should point out this is not a gain. We are simply moving money to adjust for new accounting standards. Next slide. And last, we're looking at our capital funds program. It's three categories. First, the renewal of city assets to maintain and service our 33 locations. Second, our strategic initiatives to move the Board's strategic priorities forward. And third, growth, planning requirements for a new facility in Ward 22. So the key outcomes in the 2015 budget are expanding the Constance Bay branch as part of the community center's renewal, RFID technology implementation in 50% of our branches by year's end, planning for a new location to deal with growth in Ward 22, and ongoing planning for a new central library project. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. That's our budget. If we have any questions, we'd be glad to address those.
Great. At high level or process, Councillor Shirelli to the library.
My question is about the notification system. Why is it a priority for the library board to notify people when their books are due, especially when that results in us spending money to reduce a revenue stream?
Thank you, Councillor. Just like the days of going to a bank teller or going to a travel agent, those days are behind us. So to satisfy our clientele, it's something that they have demanded, and it's something that we have to face head on. Technology is there, and we have to learn to adapt to it. We are going to look at a phased approach in addressing the issue in the future, though.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks. I will examine the input you've had on that. Thank you.
And we await that research. Thank you, Councillor. Thank you very much, Ms. McDonald. Thank you, Chair Tierney. So on to the next item, we have the Health Board, Chair Caudry and Dr. Levy with their presentation. Congratulations to Councillor Caudry, who was elected Chair of the Health Board 2 weeks ago. And welcome back, Dr. Levy. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, and good morning, everyone. As Mayor mentioned in terms of my appointment, but today I'm still only as an interim chair. The meeting is happening in March to confirm that position, but thank you for that. At this point, I want to thank the previous Board of Health members as well as the previous chair, Councillor Holmes. I think they did a fantastic job in terms of setting up the board and working through the initial stages of this board. Having said that, I think the staff of the board has played a major role. Sitting beside me is Dr. Levy, our Chief Medical Officer of Health. Along with his staff, I think they've done a fantastic job in terms of the board and carrying forward in terms of its mandate. So, as the interim chair of Ottawa Board of Health, I will be presenting the board's 2015 draft operating budget. Bonjour. À titre de président.
As interim chair of the Board of Health of Ottawa, I will table the operating budget, the preliminary one of 2015.
The Board of Health is presenting the balanced budget of $56.5 million. If approved, the budget will represent a funding provision of $12.9 million from the city, an increase of $302,000 over 2014, and $34.5 million from the province and other revenue sources. This proposed budget is also in line with the Council directed target of no more than 2% municipal tax increase. Having been on the Board of Health the last few years, I can attest the Ottawa Public Health, or OPH, is stretched due to inflationary compensation pressures, provincial funding which is not keeping pace with the growth in population, increasing service demands, and the replacement of obsolete end-of-life technology, which is integral to support clinical care and community services. Nevertheless, the proposed budget allows OPH to sustain services and addresses emerging community needs and public health risks. OPH will maintain the high quality of services residents have come to rely on and address emergency community needs by identifying operating deficiencies. However, OPH's physical forecast suggests that it will face many years of difficulty in balancing its budget and in meeting the health needs of our community. In order to balance the budget and anticipated revenue for 2015, OPH requires a reduction in staffing levels by 7 full-time equivalent positions and other program expenses, including external service purchases. OPH is proposing a multi-year reorienting of a family and child health programming in order to increase focus on clients with identified risk factors and to respond to calls from new parents to have ready access to information online as well as in person. We will continue working with our partners at Ottawa Hospital and the Ottawa Birth and Wellness Center to assess family and make sure that those with identified risk factors get the support they need. And we will ensure there is support for all families with OPH's new online and interactive parenting portal and Ottawa Public Health information line. As noted earlier, the Board of Health receives the majority of its funding from the province. OPH will apply to available one-time cost-shared provincial grants this spring to make the most of potential funding opportunities. The draft budget proposed $150,000 in one-time investment from the city to build on progress made in the areas of infection prevention and control in high-risk personal service settings, such as body modifications and tattoo parlors. An investment in this program will help reduce skin and blood-borne illnesses in the community. The budget also proposes that up to $50,000 be identified as the city's share of potential one-time Ministry of Health and long-term care projects to fund additional community public health services in areas such as food safety, telephone health assessment and counseling, urban Aboriginal health initiatives, and other emergent projects, needs to name a few. There is important work to be done over the coming months and years. OPH is steadfast in its commitment to deliver high-quality programs and services. OPH looks forward to working together with community partners with the goal of optimizing our continued efforts over the long term. We're open for questions, if you have any.
Great. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. High-level question, Councillor Eglai, to the Chair of Public Health.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Chair Caudry, you pointed out quite rightly the split in funding between the city and the province. Does your 2015 budget represent an increased ask from the province, or an increased in funding from the province?
Thank you, Councillor Eglai, for the question. I'm just going to pass the mic over to Dr. Levy for that answer.
Thank you. Just like the board receives budget direction or at least suggestion from City Council, so it does from the province. We're working on an assumption that the provincial increase will be 2% on the cost-shared programs and 0% on the 100% funded programs. So that translates into an increase in projected revenues or expected, hoped-for revenues of just a little under $600,000. It may be optimistic. We all know the provincial budget situation. And generally, we learn of the provincial decision regarding its budgeting in approximately August. Last year was in November.
Okay, thank you for that.
Great. Thank you very much, gentlemen. So we'll hold item 1 questions for the Treasurer, and we'll just go through the other items. Committee of Adjustment, Comité de Dérogation, that City Council receive and table Committee of Adjustment draft 2015 budget at its meeting of February 4th for subsequent consideration by Council and Committee of the Whole to be held on March 11th, 2015. Received? The next is Crime Prevention Ottawa, that City Council receive and table the CPO draft budget at its meeting of February 4th for subsequent consideration by Council in Committee of the Whole to be held on March 11th. Received? The next is FTE Analysis, Information Supplemental to Budget Estimates, Rapport d'analyse de RTP, Renseignements supplémentaires aux prévisions budgétaires. The Council received the FTE Analysis Report as supplemental information to the 2015 budget. Received? Draft Board of Health 2015 operating budget, that City Council receive and table the draft 2015 Board of Health operating budget at its meeting of February 4th, 2015 for subsequent consideration by Council and Committee of the Whole to be held on March 11th, 2015. Received. Ottawa Police Service, Commission de Services Policiers d'Ottawa, that the City Council receive and table the Ottawa Police Service's draft operating and capital budget at its meeting on February 4th, 2015 for subsequent consideration by Council and Committee of the Whole on March 11th, 2015. Received. Ottawa Public Library, Conseil d'administration de la Bibliothèque publique d'Ottawa, that City Council receive and table the draft 2015 Ottawa Public Library Board operating and capital budget estimates at its meeting of February 4th, 2015 for subsequent consideration by Council and Committee of the Whole on March 11th, 2015, that City Council receive the Ottawa Public Library 3-year capital forecast for information. Received. Okay, now back to item number 1, draft operating and capital budget tax and rate supported. We will be receiving, tabling, and referring this. Questions of a general nature. We're not getting into the specific line by line. What you saw on the slide or the PowerPoint presentation is the guide in terms of the questions. Councillor Eglai, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is more of a process question. In our packages this morning, we received a document entitled 2015 Draft Capital Budget Tax and Rate Support at Ward Listing for each individual ward. Will this information be online for residents to see, or is this just something to be shared amongst ourselves?
We had provided it just so the councillors. What the residents see is the books, but we can make that available to you if you want to put that on your particular page for your residents.
Yeah, I think it would be helpful because it gives a nice snapshot of what's happening in individual wards. So if we could get a soft copy of that, and in fact, I think it would be helpful if we could get soft copies or hard copies for each individual ward so we can see the whole picture.
We will provide that to you.
Thank you very much.
Great, thank you. Councillor El-Shantiri, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I want to thank the Treasurer and Mr. Fadik for assisting us with the police budget as well. But I have a question, and I probably should have thought, but I didn't. On the revenue side, when we talk about the revenue from our investment with Hydro Ottawa, can you tell me what is it this year? Just keep with the tradition.
So the investment returns for 2015, which we actually took in 2014 already, we earned the 6.5%, which generated the $13 million that's included in the budget. Are you referring to the dividend or the
No, just the dividend. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor El-Shantiri. Councillor Deans, please.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just wanted to ask a question about the tax increase at 1.75. And I probably should have asked this at budget directions, but I don't recall ever seeing before where council says set the tax rate at one level and it actually translates for a homeowner into a different level. So this morning we're hearing 1.75 means 2%. Well, I don't ever remember before the distinction between what the tax, last year when it was 1.9, it was 1.9, it wasn't 2.3. So what happened there and why the distinction this year?
I'm not surprised you don't remember because it's been quite a few years since we actually had this same situation. In this last term of council, the commercial tax ratio was always below, excuse me, the provincial threshold. So you had a 1.9% tax increase last year. It was 1.9% across all of the classes. The last time I remember we had this same situation was probably 2008, 2009, when we were above the provincial threshold, and we were telling you at that time that a 2% tax increase overall means residential will have 2.5 and commercial will have 1.5. We were showing you the change that happens. So what we're experiencing this year is the first, next year is going to be the same, and in 2016 we will have another reassessment, and we'll see what happens with the values in that. So we'll start fresh again in 2017, but at this point in time, the provincial threshold for ratios for commercial is 1.98, and we are just above that. And under the rules, when you have a budgetary tax increase and you're above that threshold in commercial or industrial, you can only pass on half of a budgetary tax increase to that particular class. It's a mechanism that the province instituted back in 1998 to make certain, because when we changed the whole tax regime and we got rid of business taxes and we made it all property taxes, that we weren't unduly burdening the commercial class, because their ratios starting off back in 1998 in some municipalities were well over 4. So they set, this is where we think it should be, and when you go above that, there's the penalty. You can't pass on the budgetary tax increase into that class. So overall, we're only going to get 1.75% increase in the tax revenues, and when we spread it out on the tax properties, that means a resident is going to pay 2% more, and commercial property, I believe, is 1.37%. So it's the way tax policy works, but your objective that you gave us, the direction, was dealing with that residential taxpayer. So that's how we've built this budget, is to get the residential taxpayer to a maximum of a 2% increase.
Okay, thank you for that answer. That's an interesting explanation. So my next question is to you, Mr. Kirkpatrick. You spoke about the need for a multi-year budgeting approach, and I understand that. I just wondered if you could break down your objectives for us a little bit more, because you talked about need to raise money, and I'm wondering, I think it's been about 7 or 8 years since we did a service review program, a review of our operations and look for savings. And I guess what I'm wondering is, are you envisioning that this multi-year budget approach will be an actual review of the staffing, service, everything across the corporation?
Mayor, to answer Councillor's question, I think it was actually further in our memory than 4 years, or I think it was 2004 we did the Universal Program Review. And if that's what you're referring to, Councillor, where it was a complete inventory of every program that the city ran, and background on that program that focused on whether it was there was a legislated service requirement there, or to what degree there was discretion that council had in terms of delivering that service, or the standard at which it was delivered, and then looking at the cost drivers of those services. That was a monumental amount of work, both at the staff level and at the council level, in receiving and considering that report. So what I'm talking about isn't that. However, some of the things that you did mention, it would be. So, for instance, and I guess in simple terms, after the adoption of this budget, your treasurer and your executive committee, we're going to be looking at, okay, what do we think might be the funding envelopes that we would tell general managers and directors, this is what we think could be provided to your programs in 16, 17, 18. Think about what your service delivery issues are today, what you expect they will be in those years, and think about what it is that you need to do in order to try to accommodate what the expected pressures of growth and inflation would be within those envelopes. And as I said earlier, we know that's always hard work. It's always not easy work. It's going to be harder, and it's going to take. We're going to need to provide ourselves with more time and an earlier process, because those solutions will be more difficult to develop and implement. So then the idea is, it's not different work, but we want to do it sooner, and we want to try to do it this year, looking at the next 3 years of this term, so that when we come to you later this fall with the 2016 guideline report, we can speak about what we think about the longer-term forecasts and your guidelines. But we will look at things like service delivery, standards of service delivery, organizational design and structure issues, but we won't go back to that complete casting of the city's inventory that we did with the UPR.
Is the primary goal of this approach to find savings in the corporation?
That's correct. So before we would want ever to have a discussion with council about priorities within service areas and potentially reducing or eliminating services, we wanted to attempt to identify how can we fund those pressures over the remainder of the term of council without resorting to those levels.
Okay, thank you.
Great, thank you. Councillor Shirelli, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. A question on the term of council priorities global number. How does that relate to past global numbers and term of council priorities?
It's actually larger in 2015 because in previous years you had the value of the upload in operating, which was roughly around $5 million a year, which is what it is now, but you only had $20 million in capital. But we've supplemented the capital with the additional earnings that we received from the endowment fund in 2014. So as opposed to $20 million, it's $32 million in capital. So it's bigger.
And how does that sustain, or is that one time that you're doing that?
That's a one-time blip that we know of now. If there's something happens in 2015, there may be an opportunity to increase the 2016 envelope, but at this point in time, it's one time.
So for the 3 subsequent, it would be adjusted with that out of it?
3 subsequent years are $20 million, so we would have to come forward with you if something happened different.
Okay, and on your presentation on rates, I think could you explain that really the amount we're charging on rates really isn't that optional, because we will have to pay it, if not this year, then in subsequent years, but we do have to pay the actual cost of water and sewer, and we can't pay more. If you could just explain how that is and the lack of options.
Water and sewer is an area that is totally funded by the user charge, and there's no commingling of the funds between tax and rate. Anything we do on the tax side that is for the rate service is paid for by the rate charge, and vice versa. So we do an exercise every year to make certain that, in fact, we're not cross-subsidizing either tax or rate. So rate is totally funded from user fees, and when you don't have sufficient user fees in and you want to maintain your investment in your assets, which you need to do in order to provide safe, reliable drinking water and sewer services, the option that we have, the only option we have available is to use more debt. So if we put debt on it this year, the impact is you're going to have more debt servicing in the future, which again has to come from the user rate. So any way you look at it, that service is 100% paid for by the users of the service.
Yeah, so over a decade ago, it was not like that. But now because that's the way it is, if you're to defer something, then you ultimately do get the same amount of money out of the users that you would get if you smooth the charge over every year, right?
That's correct. We've been smoothing the charge for the last couple of years, as opposed to having a big increase and then no increase. We've been building it up every year. But yes, the objective is to try to raise the revenues that we need for investment in that service.
So there's no money going from water or sewer rates to subsidize the arts?
That is absolutely correct.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Shirelli. Councillor McKenney.
Thank you. I have just a question. I just thank you first off for the budget and for the explanation. And I just I want to acknowledge also that I was there, so a lot of this is possible because staff were able to find $40 million in efficiencies in the last term of council through the Service Ottawa program. So on this budget, as we go through it over the next few weeks, and we delve into a bit more detail,
around, service levels and some of our pressures. I wonder if it's possible for us to get a sense of not just what the pressures are for us here in our programs, but across our city. So if we've got agencies who have requested an increase in funding, and we're not able to provide that, that's not reflected anywhere. I have some agencies, of course, in my ward who have just seen significant decreases in their homeless funding. And so the reason I'm asking for it is just that as we go through the process and decide what are our priorities, that's what the budget process is for, I'd like to know, what the pressures are in our community, so that we can then decide as a city, as a whole city, what the priorities are and what kind of decisions we have to make.
Chair, in the past we have gathered that information as a direction by council. I'll have to take that away and go back and see how extensive how comprehensively we can put that information together based on what agencies have been submitting through their applications for funding. We have multi-year funding agreements with some agencies, so we don't see the annual pressure because it's already been predetermined. So I'd like to take that away, Deputy Mayor, and go back and look and see how comprehensive that can be and see if I can give a return back to Council a flavor of what those pressures may be for your deliberations.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McKenney. Councillor Barkington.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor, and thank you to staff for their presentation today. I appreciate it, and I appreciate and recognize what goes into the budget, particularly at end of the year, as our treasurer stated. I thank you very much. Just a few questions for my understanding. With respect to the email address and the Twitter account that we're promoting and we're encouraging members of the public to use, how do the comments that come in from the public get shared with council members? So if they're not directly a resident of River Ward, but yet they submit feedback or suggestions, how does that information get to me?
My understanding is that the information gets put into a shared drive. So we transpose all of the email or any phone calls we would get and emails as well. They all get put into a shared drive so the councillors can look at those, and we advise you how to make that connection to that shared drive.
Okay, thank you. And is it just grouped by date received, or does it go, here are police matter or police feedback, library feedback?
I will have to get back to you in that. I don't remember how we actually presented in that particular drive.
Okay, thank you. With respect to the proposed increases to water and sewer has been discussed. The recreation fees 2%, water and sewer 6%. The freeze of garbage fees. Can staff assure me that we are meeting costs to operate these programs, that we're not continuing to pay out more than what it costs to operate recreational services, for example? Is this an accurate projection?
For recreation fees, recreation fees do not cover the costs. They cover a small percentage of the cost. So they will never, under the Municipal Act, your fees can never be more than your actual costs. There are only a couple of areas where the fees are the actual cost. Water and sewer fees, user fees are one of those because it's a standalone, it's completely funded from there. Transit fares only cover 53% of the operating costs, doesn't even include the capital costs in there. Building permit is an area where those fees have to cover those costs. That area is sort of gated off. The revenues they receive have to fund their services, so they're at 100%. But there are very few services that are at 100% recovery from a user fee. So I don't know if I've answered your question or not, but suffice it to say, in the garbage fee, yes, that's sufficient to cover the cost of delivering that particular service.
I will seek additional information, but I don't need that today. I can follow through with the treasurer on that, Mr. Mayor. My last question is with respect to the 2% increase. When we factor inflationary pressures on the various items that the city needs to cover, including wage increases, pressures from other contractual obligations, how much of that 2% is actually left over to allocate towards other priorities within the total budget? Is there any money left over, or is that 2% all reallocated for those items that I just listed?
That's an interesting question, because we don't actually say, here's the tax increase, what do we need to fund from that? We take the tax increase, we take the growth in the assessment base, we take the user fees, we add it all up. So we identified in total $88.7 million in capacity to deal with all of the pressures. If I were to just look, for example, at maintain is $37 million, and what the tax increase is going to generate is $24 million. So your tax increase alone is not sufficient to deal with what it costs to maintain the services that this city provides. But we don't look at it at that fashion. It's part of it's a complex, but it's part of all of the services, all of the revenue sources, and repositioning of funds that we have available to us to meet all of the pressures.
Okay. I appreciate that reply. Thank you. And again, thank you for all the hands that went into preparing the draft budget. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Councillor Brockington. Councillor Wilkinson, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just going back to the maintain, so when we have everything in here to maintain, does that mean that the standards of looking after parks, cutting the grass on the roads, looking after everything is all being kept at the same standard as we have had for the last few years?
Yes, it is. We build the budget under the maintain category with the existing standards. Only council can change the standards. So, yes.
And you think it's sufficient to, well, we'll get into that. Some people don't think it's sufficient. The provision for capital priorities, this is the amount that's going to be divided among the wards. Is there going to be any guidelines on what we're allowed to spend that on or anything, or is that going to be coming forward? Because, like, if we don't think the parks being well enough maintained, can we take some of that to do extra maintenance, or is it going to be restricted to other types of things?
You're referring to the term of council priorities?
No,
the money we've set
provision for council priorities, $5.4 million. I thought that was probably the ward things, isn't it?
No, that isn't the ward things. Oh. What that is that's going to be your term of council priority setting session, $5.4 million in operating. So that will, the allocation of that will be determined by council in the coming months when you start that process of figuring out where you want to focus over this term on which items. So that plus what we've identified in the capital envelope for you to deal with as well.
Okay. And so the part that was mentioned about having things for each ward could take and do with that, where is that in this budget?
I'm sorry, Council, can you repeat that?
Well, there was discussion about the fact that councillors would be given a sort of bulk amount they could use for doing things like traffic calming and things like that in their budgets.
That is in the strategic initiatives, the term of council priorities. So that's all for that discussion.
Okay, so we'll discuss that later on.
That's correct.
Okay. And the breakdown that you have for sometimes you group things together, like you do paratranspo and expansion of the bus service, which is something of great interest to the growing communities, which have had no increase but lots more people. That breakdown will be done at the local budget, or is that predetermined? Because there are two different services and they're put together here.
That will be discussed this afternoon at the Transit Commission meeting.
Okay. But it's not preset in the budget, or is it?
That will be discussed at the Transit Commission meeting this afternoon.
Okay. Well, look, I'm a member of the Transit Commission, so I'll deal with it then. Thank you. So that's what that is. That's all it is for council priorities.
Councillor, is that Councillor Wilkinson?
Yeah, that's all. Thank you.
Okay, your mic's on there. Great. Thank you. Councillor Caudry, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. And Ms. Similek, on page number 4, slide number 2, or the bottom slide, where it gives a breakdown of total revenues, the reserves, you're saying 3.0%. Could we get a dollar amount on that, roughly?
Yes, we can provide the actual dollars that break this up, but it's 3% of $3 billion, so we're talking, what, $9 million, something like that. So we'll provide you with the dollars.
Okay, thank you for that. In terms of the reserve fund, is that using up all of the reserves that are existing, or is that just a portion of the total reserves?
That's just a portion. This is the operating budget, so you actually have a large contribution to the reserves, but sometimes some money does come back from the reserves to fund things within operating. So basically it's if there's debt charges that need to be paid, or there's gas tax, whatever. So it's not, it's a very small part of what the reserves are used for. The rest of it all goes into your capital program.
Thank you very much, Ms. Similek. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thanks, Councillor Caudry. Conseiller Cloutier, s'il vous plaît.
Merci, Monsieur.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
The question that I was going to ask on reserves, so thank you very much.
Great minds. Thank you. Councillor Nussbaum.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. And through you, I'd like to thank the city manager and his staff. Clearly, a lot of work went into the preparation of the draft tax and rate supported budgets, and for my part, I'll pore over the documents carefully. And more importantly, I'll also be engaging extensively in public consultations, both in the session here at City Hall, I believe on the 9th of February, and as well, Councillor Fleury and I are co-hosting a consultation for our 2 wards. And in that vein, just a quick comment about the public let's say, translation or the public communication on the draft budget. I just had a chance to look briefly at this document called Maintaining Momentum. And I guess, Mr. Mayor, through you, I would just ask the city manager to ensure that staff over the coming 5 weeks are clear with the public that this is very much a draft budget. Right now, in this Maintaining Momentum, if you look at page 1, the headline is 2015 budget will deliver, and then has a series of figures, for example, that the OC Transpo fare will increase to 2.5%. Clearly, in the case of the OC Transpo budget, not only has it not been approved, but it hasn't even been tabled. I know it will be shortly. But the point is, I think a member of the public looking at this document might be under the impression that the budget is decided. When you use words like will deliver, and the word will is used throughout the document, the word proposes to is only used once as far as I could see in the brief time I've had to look at it. And so I think it's going to be important in over the course of the next 5 weeks to be very careful and clear with the public so as to not incite cynicism into this process, that this is very much a draft budget and very much still needs the approval of this council before we can say things like 2015 budget will do certain things. So it's probably too late for this document, but in terms of the public communication from the city over the course of the 5 weeks, and again, to encourage public participation and encourage the public to see this as an opportunity for really meaningful participation, I think it's important to be careful with our language. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Great. And I would point out in the other documents, Councillor, the first line is draft budget on the news release, as well as the council report is draft operating and capital budget. So appreciate your perspective on that. So this item is received, tabled, and referred to the appropriate committees. Received. Motion to adopt reports. Motion portant adoption de rapport. Councillor Chiarelli, seconded by Councillor Fleury, please.
Your Worship, moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Fleury, that the report from the Director, Human Resources, entitled FTE Analysis Report, Information Supplemental to the Budget, be received and adopted as amended.
Carried. Confirmation bylaw.
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Fleury, that the following bylaw be read and passed to confirm the proceedings of council meeting of the 4th of February 2015.
Carried. Inquiries. Do we have any written inquiries, Madam Deputy Clerk? I would remind members of the Transit Commission and any other member of council who would like to attend the Transit Commission that the Transit Commission will meet at 12:30 in the Champlain Room. Alors, la réunion de transport.
The Transit Committee will start, commission will start in the Champlain Room at 12:30.
The end of council. Adjournment, Councillor Shirelli, please.
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Fleury, that the proceedings of the council meeting of the 4th of February 2015 be adjourned.
On the motion, carried, adopté, meeting adjourned. Thank you all very much. Merci beaucoup.